Thanks again to all of our guests out there who are joining this, which is the second in our series of webinars sponsored by Enworld and Anextere around people, process, and technology. And just to remind all of you who joined last time, or for those of you who are first-time joiners, the idea that we have here is that businesses can be much better crisis prepared if they have the right people, processes, and technology all lined up. And for many of us, it's difficult to invest in those things during good times. But we want to be sure that we're ready, because trying to play catch up after a crisis has already happened, whether that be a pandemic or an earthquake or anything, that it becomes very difficult because everybody's playing the same game. And my experience over the last year, helping a lot of companies, get through this pandemic, is that those who were already, pretty much able to work remote, they had good engagement with their people, and they had all the technology, lined up, were in a much better place than those who tried to play catch up. So without further ado, we'll jump into this. So in our first session back in January, we did more of an overview. We had some business leaders talking about, different challenges they saw come up during the pandemic and in other crisis events, and how businesses were coping with that. And what we really came away from that session with is a lot of requests for a deeper dive into the people aspect. So this time we're going to be focusing on particularly how middle managers are coping with remote management. Middle management tends to be the real linchpin in any organization. Even if the vision and the leadership are there at the senior management team, if their communication, connection to, and guidance of the middle managers who are working day to day with the real people that make the business work, the people on the ground, if that's not, all in the best shape possible, then everything falls apart. So we're going to dig in today a bit more on how we can support middle managers to be the best they can be. One thing we won't focus on is whether or not the middle managers you have are, the right people to take your business forward. We may have to treat that in a separate webinar in the future, but we're going to try to provide some, better advice on how to make them better managers and coaches, and to help, get your business, better prepared for year number 2 of the pandemic. So next slide, please. So now our speakers. So I'll allow them to do a quick introduction. So starting with Sachiko.
Okay, Kevin, thank you very much for inviting me to this event today. My name is Sachiko Okamoto. I'm Chief Human Resource Officer of Panasonic Eye Processing Solutions. And this company was actually not a Panasonic anymore, but the company was sold from Panasonic in 2019. And we are currently the independent manufacturing company that sells security camera. And one thing that is very unique for the company is that actually most of the employees are working in Fukuoka, whereas I'm working in Tokyo. So, and actually I have HR team of around 17 people today, and roughly half of our team are working in Fukuoka and half are working in Tokyo. So this topic is really, resonates me that we are actually working really remotely. And I'm looking forward to learn from Mr. San and Kevin to enhance our situation as well from this discussion. And additional note on myself is I'm actually also a professional coach. So I'm delivering the coaching sessions on weekend remotely. So that may also give some insights. Thank you, Kevin.
All right, thanks, Sachiko. Yeah, so that was one of the reasons I asked Sachiko, is especially, and not only is she managing remotely from Tokyo to Fukuoka, but they have operations all around the world, which she's chasing all the time. So yeah, she's in the middle of remote management. Okay, next, so we have a returnee here, Miss Misa Yamashita, who has also honored us with her pleasure in the first session. So Misa.
Thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Misa Yamashita. I've been in the HR leadership role for the past 20 years in several global companies based in Japan or Asia. My focus area had always been leadership development, talent development, especially the next generation, talent assessment and development, and coaching, as well as the what I would call culture transformation, where we wanted to build a good corporate culture where people can bring out their best to perform and then bring a business growth. Currently, I'm a freelance, providing my consulting and advisory to the Japanese and still foreign companies based in Japan. So looking forward to today's discussions again, together with the other panelists. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Misa. And another returnee and my partner in crime in producing this series, Mr. Kevin Riondo.
Great, thanks, Kevin. And welcome everybody to our second series in the webinar. So yeah, just briefly talk about myself. I've been in Asia for about 20 plus years, 15 of those in Japan, mostly with financial firms, starting with Goldman Sachs in 2000 here. I've uniquely, I kind of did my whole career in Japan and in Asia. So I've gone from being analyst level, first year level, all the way through middle management level. And then finally, my previous job before Anextere was the COO of PGIM Investments Japan, which is part of Prudential Japan. So I've kind of seen all of those levels. I've experienced all of those levels and understand, you know, the complexities there. And also what's unique about my background about I would mostly with foreign firms, so it's been mostly US firms actually, global and asset management focused. So even though I belong to huge global organizations, the operations in Japan or in Asia were actually not that large. So I've experienced sort of the big organization along with the smaller organizations outside of the home office. So I have a lot of experience working with, and I think it was like 90 to 100 people was the average of the companies I worked at. So I've seen kind of both sides of that. And I'll talk a bit about that in the upcoming discussions.
Okay, thanks. And I think, Kevin, if you can just give us a quick snapshot of Anextere.
Sure. Yeah, so starting last year, so we've been going for about a year now, we launched a company called Anextere. And it's a business and technology solutions company. And we have a global alignment, we're a global expertise and localized solutions servicing Japan and Asia. We're actually an independent financial services consulting company generally. And we focus on areas like business strategy, operational optimization, and integration, implementation, and delivery. So we actually work with our clients and deliver the solutions that we come up using our experiences in that. We focus on kind of business process digitization, and we're launching a new product called DTH Plus, Digital Transformation Hub, plus integration implementation. We also do risk management solutions as part of that. And lastly, management consultancy, which is more related to like operational transformations and C-suite type of work, which is all kind of, they all work together actually as part of our consulting business. So that's for.
All right, thanks for that, Kevin. I guess now on to your moderator, me. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Kevin Naylor. I've been here in Japan for 24 plus years and here with N-World for 15 plus. I did most of my original consulting work in recruitment in financial services, but since then, I've covered about every area of our business, including about 6 months looking after our APAC businesses, a year trying to manage our back office and finding that much more difficult than managing sales, actually. And now I head up business development, so engaging senior HR leaders and business leaders across the market to try to make sure that we're sharing all the information that we get to help them empower their businesses, but also taking back a lot of lessons to help us be better supportive of them. For those of you that don't know N-World, next slide, please. So we are the leading HR, recruitment and retention solutions company for the global talent market here in Japan. So about 70% of our clients are gaishike, foreign capital firms operating here, and 30% global or globalizing Japanese firms. We have solutions in standard permanent contingency recruitment, executive search, professional contract, as well as recruitment process outsourcing. And recently, we've also started being able to supply the HR tech solutions that are created by our parent company, which is Japan, a listed Japanese company here. So without further ado, no more advertising for Anextere and N-World, but let's get to the meat of this and into the panel discussion. So next, and actually I will, so let me just remind everyone, we're going to discuss some questions related to middle managers and how we can better help them to coach and manage their staff in this new normal situation. So I'll ask my support here to move us to just talking heads and out of the presentation mode, and then we'll get into the discussion. So, okay, let's see here. I need to change my view. Okay, so I think to start with, I'm going to throw the first question to Sachiko, who is maybe our active expert in remote management. So Sachiko,
Yes, thank you.
prior to the pandemic, I mean, I think we all know that managers, middle managers especially, struggle with lots of different issues related to staff management. So what I'd like to ask you to reflect on is, what kind of issues did you see middle managers in your organization or other organizations struggling with pre-COVID? And then what are some of the differences or changes that they struggled with, after they moved to a more remote management paradigm?
All right. When I got this question, I thought about, okay, maybe directly answering the question to what they are struggling looks a bit difficult for me. But I thought about who is struggling and why are they struggling. Yeah, and then I thought that if somebody is doing quite well before COVID, even on the real face-to-face environment, maybe they are not so much struggling online. And the challenge we face, I see the middle manager is facing, is that if they were not really consciously managing people in a pre-COVID situation, then it gets really hard, because you need to manage people through online, and sometimes people don't get your emotions or physical gestures face to face, or people not in the office, maybe not only your direct reports, but some people around are hearing, and then maybe they can. But now that you don't have this follow-up, unofficial follow-up, and that's why I found that who are struggling, yes, really consciously making the people management exercise are now more struggling. And does it make sense? I think that what we can do for these middle management is that as a senior leaders, we can help them to make it conscious, what they need to do as a manager. We can make them conscious so that they make those actions consciously. Sorry,
Okay,
it seems my connection is really bad.
Yeah, I think I saw you fading out, but you seem to be fine right now. So just to recap, so basically what you're saying is people that were doing okay at management prior to the pandemic were also doing okay afterwards, but that basically people who were struggling with being very conscious or intentional about managing and coaching their staff before, that the remote situation has just made that worse. And so refocusing them on being conscious about that and helping them figure out how to overcome the natural support that we get by building closer relationships, working side by side, or being able to be in the office and seeing each other day to day. Okay, that makes a lot of sense based on my experience.
Being conscious, in other words, if I elaborate being conscious in other words, people who are structured in their management can keep perform in a remote work environment. For example, like one of my direct reports has very structured way of managing. Like every week he has one-on-one with his team members, and then when they need to inform certain things, he's very organized in sharing the information. So if he does that, it's really easy to transit to the remote environment. But other managers were kind of not very clear in communication, but people are picking up face-to-face basis. And now that other people cannot pick up what he wanna say. So that's a challenge for him, and I need to help him to be clear in communicating remote environment.
Interesting. So having a system or a process is helping those people. Okay. So Misa, how about you? Any comments to follow up on what Sachiko said, or anything different?
Well, yeah, I based on my experience pre-COVID, and then at the very earlier stage or the initial stage of pandemic, which was 1 year ago, I totally agree with Sachiko-san, where there were a group of the who are doing well with the people management versus who are not, and then there are maybe the kinds of challenges that any managers were faced pre-COVID didn't really change after the COVID either, although maybe the focus area may have changed a little bit. Again, based on my experience, I think more fundamental people management, so to speak, was required, which in my word was more of the concerns around their health and the safety. We needed to make sure that they are all healthy and safe, working remotely, because we don't see them face to face anymore. But then the managers needed to make sure that they are healthy and safely still working remotely. So that became a bit of a bigger focus. But then overall, the kinds of the challenges didn't really change. However, going back to Sachiko-san's point, there were people who could not even do that very basic stuff. And then there were maybe more intervention required by the HR people or by the senior managers, because, again, the priority was really to make sure that the people are safe and healthy.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. We experienced that a lot as well here, that to support the middle managers, we had to get much more involved from a senior management perspective and create more structure around sharing information and engaging. So Kevin, how about you? Anything different to share?
First of all, I agree with all those points. And I've got a few more examples, maybe from a business perspective and what I went through as a senior manager. I think, first of all, I think middle management is operationally the most important and difficult role in a company. So, and why do I say that? I think one is literally you're in the middle. So literally you're in the middle between their senior managers and the staff. And it can be a very difficult situation to balance both of those out effectively. Secondly, there's a lot of high expectations for middle managers. And for many of them, it's a step up in their career from what they're in, that expectation high. From my experiences, I think I looked at middle managers from three levels. One, so someone who knows their job, reviewer, checker, does that type of work. Then they become people managers. Maybe for the first time in their career, they're now managing people. There's a lot of issues there with OJT, on-job training. And then project management. I think a lot of them have to start managing projects and doing more value on top of their daily work. Again, which is also a big change for them. So I think from my experiences, I think there were middle managers often have difficulties with two of the three categories: people management and project management. I think are the two areas that stick out the most. And it's also very difficult to become from a doer to an overseer transition. These things are very difficult parts, and it takes a lot of work to train people to help them. So when I was at Goldman Sachs, they had a huge middle management training program, and they were very conscious about that because they realized how important it was to have the managers very effective. Now, I think the worst case scenario would be they also don't have the capability, or they don't have the skill set. That's something that's very difficult to deal with. So that there's very different categories. And in fact, at times in my career, as a senior manager, I was almost like an HR professional at that point. So I was basically doing like 80% HR and 20% project management, because in many cases I was covering for the middle managers. And that is something that's not sustainable or nothing that can keep going. So I think there's a lot of, you have to really understand where they're struggling, what they're struggling with, and is it fixable or not fixable? And going on the remote, it just magnifies those issues more, as we just discussed. So all those issues probably come up and you realize as a manager, you're senior manager, you're like, wow, we'd have some serious issues that I wasn't aware of potentially, or now, because it's easier to see as a remote, and you have to do something about that.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's very good, Kevin, and something that I'd like to stress now for those of us on the call, either HR professionals or business leaders. So I think that oftentimes when people get promoted to management, they don't get enough real training or sustained training, because the reality is people often get promoted not because they're passionate about management or because they're good at it, but because they're good as an individual contributor. And then oftentimes, you know, we've got a few hours of classroom work, and then we're expected to go out and be managers. But the reality is building those skills and building the habits to be a good manager takes time. And I think we often expect as senior managers that, well, they're a manager, so we shouldn't have to, you know, guide them by the hand. So we don't necessarily invest enough time in coaching them into being better managers. So
the key
I think,
point, Kevin, is OJT, on the job training, is huge, because I think a lot of the regular training, people look at it, don't take it very seriously, right? And Goldman actually customized their stuff, which was quite good, I thought. They customized it for each person, what they're doing. And the OJT is really important to do that for middle management.
okay, yep. I think that's a key point. And, you know, not all of us have the budget to invest that maybe Goldman Sachs does, but first being conscious of this and then seeing what we can do on a day-to-day basis would be good. So I'd like to move on to the next question. I think we've got a good start here. So Misa, I'm going to pick on you next. And I think something that I've seen come up when I've been talking to business leaders a lot over this last year is that, okay, we're in a critical situation. We need to drive revenue. We need to keep the company alive. So our people need to work harder than ever. But at the same time, okay, middle manager, you need to be sure that your people are engaged and that they feel both psychologically and physically safe. And so I think many middle managers feel stuck in the middle, that they have to choose one or the other. Could you make any comments on that, or anything that we could do as senior managers to try and help those people that feel that middle managers feel they have to make a choice?
Sure. Yeah, I think this question of how to grow the business versus or as opposed to how to manage the people can be very contradictory, but actually in my experience as well, and then maybe the whole trend of HR practice as well over the years, at least still before the COVID happened, is that we really, once we take care of our people, then they will engage and then they will perform, and therefore the business will grow. I think that good connection is being more emphasized these days as well, as opposed to we are kind of whipping them to grow the business in a sense, maybe more old style of management. That doesn't work anymore these days, especially then COVID happened, and then now we need to really take care of the people. What happened with the COVID situation, and which one of the biggest thing that happened with the COVID was really we were cut off the touch points with the office, and now without really touching them or seeing them, we now need to even more. And then how to do it is very, very difficult, because we are not very used to doing it online or with the phone and all that. So I think that piece, it needs to be the area that we still need to train our people as well. And then I don't think it's not only middle managers, but everybody needs to be really better at utilizing more online and other tools as well, right? So I think that's what we need to do. And then once middle managers can become better in utilizing those tools, I think that situation will become better. At the same time, it's not just a tool, right? But then we need to make sure that they are able to really connect with their people. Again, in the past, we were able to really talk more unofficially outside of the meeting with the people along the corridor or in the bathroom and so on, so that we can have more casual conversation. Now we don't have those opportunities anymore. So only with the online situation, we still need to do more official business reviews and those official conversations. But at the same time, we need to really have more casual conversation as well, so to speak, so that we show cares to those people. So situation becomes very complicated, but I think those are the situation that we are faced today. And then somehow once everybody can become better in those areas, I'm sure that their business will pick up or will grow even further.
Yeah, I think those are some really, really, hard-hitting points there, Misa, that we're all, aware of, but then, getting to how we make that difference, right? Because, day to day, we spend all our time encouraging our people to become more productive, to get their job done, to, add to the top line, add to the bottom line. And it's very rare that we encourage them to have more, meaningful interactions with their team members. But the reality is that, a team works built on trust and bonds that are built between people. And that's harder to do when you're not seeing them day to day and sharing those little stories about, each other's kids or hobbies or pets or whatever that is. So very good. So Sachiko, do you have anything else would you add anything to what Misa said about those people that are kind of feel trapped between one another?
Yeah, I totally agree with Misa-san that it's not a trade-off, but you need to really shift the management style by either directing, from directing to more empowering and encouraging and engaging. And another point I want to make a comment on here is that I feel that many people have assumption that you cannot connect well with people online. And that's something I want to disagree sometimes. Of course, it's easier to connect face-to-face, but actually you can connect a lot with online. And I can tell that from my coaching experience, because in coaching, I actually never meet them in person. I purely meet them on Zoom, and I have one-on-one session on weekends. And we really go into very deep inside, and they reflect and they share, and even on first sight, and we can do that even online. And the difference is not that I have a coaching certificate, but it's the mindset that you can connect online. And if managers already feel that, oh, I cannot connect, it's online, it's official, then it stays official. But sometimes we can create a moment, official moments, if we just want to have it.
No, I think that's a really good point, and I think we've had some comments as well in the chat to the same point, and we can circle back on that later. But I think a lot of us we're stuck in that mindset that because it's remote, we can't build deeper connections, and it's not as easy perhaps, but it's shoganai, to take one of my favorite Japanese words. So how do we adapt to it, and how do we use those tools and get past our mental block to help others do so? Good. Kevin, what would you say to bring us home on this topic?
So again, I'll take a bit from a strategic perspective and a business strategic perspective. I think senior managers and executives should understand that their people, processes, and technology are actually enables their business. And this is why we're doing these webinars, is to highlight that fact. And it's not just from a cost perspective, but it's also from a revenue perspective too. You have to be able to combine all of that to also get your revenues and to meet your goals. The issue we're dealing with now, though, in the business environment is that we're talking about results in months, not years, in weeks, not months. I mean, it's very stressful. People want to see results. They want to see revenues. and you're living in an environment that's very difficult to have empathy for your staff or for others for that matter. And then you throw in the remote work, and I guess what goes out the window is the whole kuki yomanai, kuki yomeru. People who live off of the idea that they can kind of see and feel people, and they can kind of understand them without really being direct and having discussions. And I think a lot of that's got to do, and I think too, big one. You could probably see their staff, and it comes out in the remote environment. I think I'll do that. I think a couple of things you could do to figure that out. Now, I've seen a couple of texts on this. One is when I worked at PIMCO, one of the senior managers there had a great 3 to 5 year plan process. Now, within the 3 to 5 year plan, there was a lot of flexibility around the tactical thing. You could switch it, you could do this depending on the environment, depending on what you're doing. And it was very logical and it was easy to explain, and people paid attention to the messaging. I think a lot of companies do 3 to 5 year plans, but a lot of them don't do it well or right. And it's not it's not made in it to be a changing document, if you know what I mean, depending on the situation. So I've seen that that's really important. Secondly, I think you have to pay a lot of attention to your performance of your staff. Even in a remote environment, you can't ignore performance issues and problems. And you have to take steps to mitigate and work on those things. What I've seen, and I've seen this also in Japan, if you avoid issues and problems, if you let them go, especially with people and performance, and if the company's not doing well in a revenue perspective, for that matter, those tendency to blow up in a big way. And at one point, the home office or someone comes in and says, we're closing you down, or we're going to do this or that. There's a bigger repercussion if you do not manage your people well, and you do not manage it, and you're not open and transparent with what you're doing. So I think these things are really important. In a remote environment, you have to really manage this closely, and you have to be transparent and open with what you're doing, because I think that's the better for the firm in general for long term.
Yeah. All right. Very good. I think, very, cogent points on that. And especially, I think the performance management part. I mean, it's so easy to ignore or overlook or try to put off, or to feel bad for people because they're in a pandemic situation. But most people who are underperforming know that they're underperforming. They feel it, and that ignoring that fact makes you absent as a manager, and then that just makes them feel that you care that much less. And even if that's a difficult discussion, like maybe this is not the right role for you or the right firm or whatever, but having that discussion up front is showing that you care, and that can help you open up the discussion and actually sort through, okay, well, what is an actual skill performance issue, what's a motivation issue, or what maybe is creeping in from the personal side. So no, I think that's really good. And many of us, and certainly many of our middle managers, maybe it's easier to avoid those discussions remotely, I think. So, all right, as we're moving on for time, something that we did not get enough of in the last webinar, and that we were specifically requested to get more to in this one, is getting to specific recommendations and solutions for people to take away. So we definitely want to give our viewers some omiyage to take home and try out. I think we've already touched on a few things, but I'm going to circle around and pin each of you down on one specific recommendation for our viewers to take back to try out that doesn't require $1 million budget. So so I think I'm going to pick on Kevin first. And so if you have to tell our viewers like one thing that they should take away and try out, what would it be?
So that's a great question. So practical takeaways, I would say communication is obviously the big thing. Now, when I meet in communication, like methods, like emails, chats, VCs, and managing all of those accordingly. I had really good advice when I was younger in my career that was basically, I think he said 50% of your time is going to be writing emails. Now this is 15 years ago. And he said, you have to become better at writing emails, especially remotely. When I say remotely, I mean, for many of us in work for foreign firms, for sure, we kind of feel remote anyway, because we're doing conference calls, VCs every night. with our stakeholders in the US and Europe and everywhere. So a lot of us learned how to work remotely and effectively because we were in that situation. We had to. Okay, a lot of our middle managers have never had that experience, or they're just starting to have that experience. So they actually have never learned how to work well remotely, effectively. So I would say, there's some skill sets you really need to teach. One is, I would say, I call it global project management skill sets. When I say global project management, it's how do you write emails to get things done? So direct emails. How do you write a direct email in a nice manner so you don't make everyone angry? Keeping people in the loop. How do you keep everybody in the loop of the messaging you're making on your emails? Be informative. Standalone meaning. In other words, make it standalone and make it enough information so you can live that way. And then actionable, okay? But these are sort of key ways to manage emails and communications and keep people in the loop when you're not sitting in front of them, which a lot of people need to work on. Chats, I think chats are more ad hoc and informal. I know the greetings is important. So in the morning, good morning, how are you doing? We're doing this, and check in periodically in the day to show that you're paying attention as a senior manager. I think those things make people feel better. And then lastly, VCs. And this goes back to the point of meeting once a week in the original without remote. So you may want to have one on a Monday. You may want then follow up on a Friday. And then you're covering and doing that and have agendas and have people actively participate. And I would also say that people have to use their video because you have to see people's faces and you have to see how people are feeling visually more than the words, because visual often speaks much louder than words, especially in Japan. But I would say that it's probably the same everywhere in the world. So those are the main takeaways I would give for practical, and it wouldn't cost that much to do that.
All right, thanks very much for that, Kevin. So I hope our listeners were out there taking notes. So Misa, how about you? What would be the one practical takeaway that you would offer for people?
Sure, I would say build a connection and maybe trust-based relationship with your people. Treat them as a human being, not as a working machine to deliver, but so that you can show the care. I think this is a bit different approach than just dealing them and then just do the more simple performance management. It may become a bit complicated, but again, I think a building connection is the very basics of any team management as a manager. So I would say building connections, building a good trust-based relationship would be my advice at this moment.
Okay, so I think that's a good point, Misa. But I'm gonna just play devil's advocate a little bit and challenge you on this. So I think part of the problem with many middle managers that, and this question is maybe related to one that we've already got in the Q&A now, is like that now that they're remote, they don't know how to build those connections as well. So is there any kind of practical advice for somebody who doesn't feel comfortable, or way they can set up systems or something to support them to start being able to do that?
Sure. I think, in terms of the tools, Kevin, listed a lot. So maybe we can use one of those or some of those things. But maybe my point would be the different approach to the people. So, maybe managers now don't have to know everything. Managers, I think, should be more honest in saying, I don't know. If I don't know something, I don't know how to manage the people online. He or she can say, I don't know how to do it, but let's discuss, with the people so that you can really get the feedback from the people on how they want to be managed online versus I know how to do it and I'm a manager, so I know everything. I don't think that the approach and the mindset doesn't work anymore. So I think being honest and saying no is totally fine. And then if managers feel very uncomfortable or vulnerable in saying so, I don't think that's now is the time to change. And you can now say, I don't know.
Well, actually, I think that really boils it down to one good piece of practical advice that you hear a lot in coaching and great leadership, right? Is be vulnerable as a manager.
Right.
I think especially in kind of these battlefield conditions when we're trying to protect the company, managers feel they have to be that strong leader, but saying, you know, I'm not sure, what do you think? Or yeah, how do you want to be? I think that's a great question. How do you prefer to be managed? And actually engaging with people, and you know, that's not throwing it back to them, but you know, really opening up a discussion as, you know, people that communicate with each other and building a relationship on that, because it's the elephant in the room, right? Everybody knows it's not easy. So really just opening up and talking about that and working through it together can build a bond. And that can help a lot with performance management. I think that's a really great specific point. So Sachiko, how about you? What's your piece of
Yeah,
advice?
thank you. Maybe I'm repeating the same thing in my own way, with the same thing as Kevin and Misa-san mentioned. But what I would say is that in this changing time, what is important is learn continuously and learn together in the team, and that's the point I want to make. And you know, nobody has the right answer, so you need to learn together how we could effectively work in a remote environment. And if I give concrete advice of how we can learn together effectively, is that, for example, manager can set a meeting where they don't talk about the business or the work, but they could discuss about how they are working. And actually, we just did it last week. So all the HR team got together last week, and then I posed a question. So, okay, now that under COVID, we are working very differently. And then what's good, what's working well, and what's not working well. And then I let the team discuss, and we had many ideas came up, and mostly people satisfied. But some people say that actually I don't have time to go to restroom now, because now that it's at home online and all the meetings are back to back, and then sometimes they miss to go the time to go to restroom. So we discussed together what do we do, and then, okay, now that now from that day within HR team, all the HR meeting officially start 2 minutes later. Meeting starts at 2. Then actually our official meeting starts at, if you want to go to the restroom, or sometime you can have an unofficial conversation for 3 minutes. And that's, and yeah, my point is, not this idea may not relevant to your specific companies, but what I wanted to say is, yeah, as a leader, the role of us is to create a setting, create a place for them to discuss and learn together and come up with ideas. That's how I believe.
And I think that's great because it allows you to build a bond more as peers and not just, you know, manager and employee relationship. But actually, you know, I don't want to diminish that, but that little specific thing you mentioned, I think is also really key and something people can do so easily. We actually recently, for a different reason, although I will embarrass my boss a little bit online here since he's not here, for those of you who know VJ, you know, almost all the time when we've got, you know, a catch up, we're running back to back, he's in back to back meetings all day. And a lot of times we have a catch where he's like, can I have time to run to the restroom real quick? So yeah. And I think, yeah, it looks like Sugita-san's mentioning this in the chat. So we've done this. We've moved to a 50-minute standard meeting, not an hour, or a 25-minute standard meeting. So that those are the book times, and that's the default time, so that people have time to catch their breath, get a cup of coffee, go to the restroom, whatever. But one of the main reasons we did this was just to save a bit more time for our senior management team. But the other effect is it does give people time, because everybody I talk to is worn out from back to back to back meetings. And the assumption is because you're working from home, you can do that, but it's not healthy. So I think that's a really good practical thing. Just a couple of things that I think are connected to what we've talked about. You mentioned earlier, Sachiko, your manager who had a system in place was doing very well for management and is very systematic about that. So I think working with your middle managers to create a management cadence or a management system, because many of them are doing that just by feeling. And so, yeah, we worked with some of our managers, and some of our best ones, they have, a regular meeting every morning. They call it like a stand up, where everybody logs on just for 5 or 10 minutes to say, okay, this is my plan for the day. This is what went well yesterday. This is what didn't go bad. This is how to catch me. And it's not about setting goals or KPIs or anything like that, but just everybody to touch base and discuss more qualitatively their plans for the day or anything relevant to the team. And then at the beginning, we also implemented evening catch-ups to touch base to see how things were going. And again, we encouraged our managers to avoid the KPIs, to avoid the business things, but more just the rhythms and building more that feeling that you're still operating as a team together. And then, yeah, kind of separating the formal business-driven discussions, like, okay, are you hitting your targets or not, from the casual catch-ups. I think that's really important, and Misa touched on that as well. Those are two things I'd really like to strongly recommend. And if anybody, separately would like to talk about, some structures, then yeah, we got that. Something that came through in the chat as well from Sugita-san, which also I was going to suggest, is getting your managers together to share best practices. So I think we too often keep our managers separate, and as senior managers deal with them individually, but getting them together every once in a while and having that discussion with them about, okay, what's working, what's not working, and how can we support each other. So building a team among your managers too, to help them help each other. Okay, so I think now we're a little over time, but we've kind of started on the Q&A a bit. Here regarding online communication, I feel unofficial communication is harder than in-person communication, or than more official. So could you show an example of informal or unofficial communication opportunities, like Zoom dinner, drink? Do those work, or should we set these things regularly? So for any of our panelists, do you have any opinions on how to share or to set those more unofficial communications that we haven't touched on yet?
Maybe I can go first. I mean, I think we're now talking about one-on-ones and, team meetings, but, even in either situation, either in group or individually, 1 hour meeting, or now 50-minute meeting, I would say can start with a 5-minute more casual conversation on, how was your weekend, how's your family, whatever. Did you go to the cherry blossom sightseeing? So things like that. I think that little conversation can still be very important, and then make the participants feel more comfortable in speaking up. So it's like a whole series of business conversation, but even one meeting can be divided into that little section, and the rest can still be devoted to the more business serious conversation.
Okay, thanks.
Because we cannot go out for dinner like we did more regularly in the past. So even a meeting can have 2 aspects at the same time.
Well, you can go out for dinner if you work for certain ministries here in Japan, but then that gets into the news, right? So
that's right.
Sorry, I don't think we have anyone from the government joining us today, so hopefully. So I think that's helpful. Another thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sachiko.
All right, I was sharing one example, very practical, that's actually we do. So in my team last year, almost every month we had a new person in the team. So we does a kangekai, like welcome party, every month online. And now that in the beginning it was like 4 or 5 people, but now that we have 15 people, so it's quite a big team. Well, what is good at online like welcome party is that we can use a breakout session in Zoom. So in the beginning, quickly, like everybody make a quick introduction to the new person. But then after that, we quickly split into like 3 people or 4 people group, and then we circulate in every 15 minutes. Then the newcomer easily get to talk to everyone in a very, very small group. And it's really effective to onboard a person emotionally. And I think if we have a physical party with 15 people, then new person usually don't get to talk to everyone. But actually, online is much flexible in that, and you can do, yeah, much more effectively.
Yeah, the breakout room technology has really, moved forward. I mean, we're going to play with that from 1 o'clock here for anybody who joined later. So if you want to try that and see how it works, but we did something for our Christmas party as well as for our New Year's party this year, where we created breakout rooms and randomly just sent 100 people into different breakout rooms and put them in, together with people maybe they've never met. And it actually, we had a lot of positive feedback, so that utilizing the technology can help with those casual interactions. And we're actually, our ambassador group, which is made up of a lot of volunteers from our younger staff in the company, are going to try another similar sort of thing to kick off April for us here. So creating those random interactions, that happen in the hallway or in the bathroom that Misa was talking about earlier. I think one other thing that I would say in response to Nori's question is intentionally, what I would say to create better engagement, double the time that you spend with your staff, but then quadruple the number of interactions. So for example, if in the past you had 1 hour catch up every week, I think if you're in online, as a minimum, double that to 2 hours worth of time with your staff every week, but then break it into 4 interactions. So maybe that's 4 30-minute sessions, or however you want to do that. So I think what I've found is more frequent connection is a substitute for the longer dinners or for those more lunches or conversations over drinks. So in the remote environment, you have to contact more often to build those connections, but for less time, because people get worn out staring at a screen for an hour or 2 hours. And so I think that's why, for me, the Zoom drinks or things like that, the online drinks have kind of, really, worn out a little bit. Some people are doing well with it, but I think you have to, trying to keep that fresh is difficult. So sorry, we've got another question in the chat here. Or sorry, actually, yeah, it came from the chat, and this is a difficult one that I'm not sure we'll be able to solve, but so this again, so how do you arrange global web-based meetings that for Japan always mean they take place between 9 and 12 p.m.? What's the best practice here besides having just Japan speak first? So any ideas here? Luckily, I'm in Japan with head office here, so I'm not subjected to it. Yeah. Is there any way to fight this? I mean, this happened for people in finance well before the pandemic, right?
Yeah, this I can maybe take a bit. I think this goes back to the point I was making earlier, and that is some people have been working like this their whole careers here, and it seems like the more senior you get, the more you have to deal with these things like late night calls. It's all remote. How do you deal with your bosses? You don't see them. What are they thinking? There's always these questions in people's minds, and a lot of people who are in that position have dealt with that. Now, the question becomes, how do you help people like Kevin, who's got his boss in here in Japan and has always been in middle offices, and again, middle management, and it's training them to be able to communicate and understand how to work in that environment. So like, how do you do global calls? How do you balance your time? How do you make, there's all these things about time management that are huge, I think, important parts, right? Because you could have people working all the way from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on a daily basis if they have late calls with the US or Europe. So you really have to think about how you're balancing these people's days and how they, so if you have time, you can take time out of a day, but then you have a late call. Managing this balance is huge, and it's very important in a remote environment. This is something, again, that I and others have gone through in our careers. How do you manage these calls and manage this remote? But for people that haven't gone through it before, it could cause a lot of stress and a lot of issues. So you really have to think about how you help them manage their time to make it so that they can do it and feel all right about it.
And I was having lunch a few weeks ago, or maybe a couple of months ago now, with an HR professional, and she was working in a company. She's working in a company that's U.S. based and struggling, and her whole team was always booked in at 10 o'clock every night. And so I think sometimes it's just teaching people here to speak up or to raise your hand against that, because if you look at best practices from an HR perspective, these things that come out of the Harvard Business Review or wherever, everybody's going to tell you you need to rest and recharge, and that disengagement and fatigue set in from overworking in this environment. So I think most people are they're not aware overseas how much they're infringing on time, and they're also more used to people raising their hand and saying, hey, that doesn't work for me. And I think we're just, from cultural perspective, we're less likely to raise our hand here in Japan and push back. So it's finding that voice, or us as managers helping them to do so, finding out if they're getting a lot of those and giving them a hand to just say, look, that's not good. Can we do it on my time at least once a week? Something. So I think a lot of people are going to have to drop off, and we're at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to cut that here, and I'm going to give some directions for those who can stay on. We'll be moving into the networking session next. So I'm going to go back into presentation, but for those who can't join afterwards, so thank you very much for joining. Please look out for the survey. Thanks again to Sachiko, Misa, and Kevin for spending their time and sharing their great knowledge here. So thanks again for joining. So if you like, please click in and join that next session. We're going to be shutting this one down now. So thank you.